So, wanting just to do a land acknowledgement. As you know, we are situated in the Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people in Dupuktuk, Halifax. We have a responsibility to acknowledge and understand the history and current experiences of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, and for this understanding to inform the work that we do, so that first, we can stop perpetuating the damages of colonization, and second, that we can begin to repair them. And for those of you who were in our session yesterday, I'm sorry this is a bit of a repeat, but I really just do want to bring to the attention, for those that don't know, some of the history of Indigenous experience in the military. For those who really served as equals on the battlefield, but not at home. So it wasn't until 1995, 50 years after the Second World War, that Indigenous peoples were allowed to lay Remembrance Day wreaths at the National War Memorial and to remember and honor their dead comrades. After the First World War, returning veterans who were Indigenous did not receive the same assistance as other returned soldiers. Many First Nation veterans from the Second World War had to either give up their Indian status to join the war effort, or found that when they returned home after fighting overseas for Canada, they were no longer considered Indians because the Indian Act specified that if you're absent from the reserve for more than 4 years, you no longer held your status. Restrictions within the Indian Act prevented veterans from learning about available benefits and programs, and when they did access benefits, grant payouts were given to the Indian agent rather than directly to themselves. The lives of numerous Indigenous veterans ended in despair and poverty, including Tommy Prince, the most decorated Indigenous war veteran who in 1977 died homeless at the age of 62 in Winnipeg. Indigenous veteran homelessness in Canada really highlights the cumulative ways in which homelessness, former military service, and indigeneity intersect to create unique risk factors that we should all be aware of. So Built for Zero is one of a number of initiatives of the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness, which leads a national movement of individuals, organizations, and communities working together to end homelessness in Canada, and of course the conference is one of the ways that we do that. But we're talking about communities today that are participating in Built for Zero, which works towards a community by community, population by population based end to homelessness, starting with chronic and veteran homelessness as the first steps. We're seeking to create a tipping point in Canada with enough functional zero proof points demonstrating that homelessness can be rare and brief, that it is not inevitable or a way of life, such that ending homelessness becomes the expectation in every community. We're doing our learning alongside and together with 25 communities in the Built for Zero movement who have signed up to say, I want to work on ending veteran homelessness, and those communities are listed today here on the slide. Communities who have, within that group, reached what we call a milestone of functional zero veteran homelessness, including London, St. Thomas, Elgin, Fort McMurray, Alberta, and 3 more that have been confirmed but not yet announced. They'll be announced in early December. These are the folks that you'll be hearing from on the panel today. So what do we mean by functional zero? And there's a video here that's linked in that you can watch afterwards if you want to learn more, but it's really a milestone that shows a community has measurably ended homelessness for a population and continues to watch and support sustaining that end. We know that homelessness is a dynamic problem that is constantly changing. People may be entering homelessness for the first time or cycling in and out of the system, and that means that homelessness is unpredictable. But how we respond to it isn't. So our goal is for communities to respond to homelessness in real time and create a coordinated and efficient system such that they can house people at a greater rate than they're entering homelessness. And it is not about making the problem less visible. It's not about being a one-time achievement. It's not meant to be aspirational but unachievable. And it is not the end, but really that first milestone in beginning the hard work in sustaining and creating a new reality where homelessness is rare, brief, and non-recurring. So how did these folks come to be sort of confirmed with a functional zero veteran homelessness? So we have a definition here on the slide. When the number of veterans experiencing homelessness is less than or equal to the number of veterans a community has proven it can house in a month, or 3 or less whichever is greater. And that they have held that for at least 3 consecutive months. And then we also go through a confirmation process, rechecking their data, looking at the partnerships, looking at how their system is functioning, to really make sure that they're grounded in that achievement and are set up to kind of sustain going forward. And again, there's a video and a handout and some further information there linked if you want to learn more. So just wanted to give you an example of some data that we look at, and this is London's public dashboard on the Built for Zero website, community progress page. And it shows the number of veterans who are actively experiencing homelessness at the end of each month. So London got to a quality by name list, meaning we checked a number of factors to ensure that they had a comprehensive, real-time, unique list of individuals in the community who are experiencing veteran homelessness that they are all kind of working towards supporting. They achieved that in March of 2020. And then you can see 3 consecutive months at 3 or less in October. And then we worked through the checklist process to confirm them, and then they were announced in February of 2021. And then since that time, for almost a year, they really sustained at that functional zero threshold or below. There was a period of time that number went up, and then they brought it back down. So communities are being sort of accountable to continuing to look at this data, looking at the changing nature of what's going on in their homelessness, and figuring out what do we need to do next to really end homelessness for veterans each month. What this doesn't show is the dynamic picture of homelessness in a community. There's inflow and outflow happening constantly. So over this time, London has housed 68 veterans. So you can imagine if they were not doing this work in their community, how much worse the issue could be. So we're now going to turn the conversation over to our panel. And I'm going to begin by asking everyone on the panel to introduce themselves and their connection to the veteran work, and who else in their community works specifically on ending veteran homelessness. And we'll start with Craig Cooper from London.
Thanks, Marie. Good morning, everybody. As Marie mentioned, my name is Craig Cooper, and I am the Director of Housing Stability Services at the City of London. Before we go a little bit further, I do want to recognize and do a land acknowledgement for the work we do in the City of London. The City of London is situated on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Lenape and Ottawandaran peoples. And the work my team and I do really reflect our commitment to reconciliation and an Indigenous, led by Indigenous approach to many of the work, much of the work that we do. So our veterans work really began well before I worked at the city, and it was a number of partners through some lunch and learns that really came together. Our Veterans Affairs Canada, our Legion, our local legions, our local Parkwood Hospital, which traditionally had historically been a veterans hospital, really came to the table and started sharing information and building a relationship and really recognizing we need to work together. And so a lot of our work started right there. And I'll turn it over to Danielle.
Thanks, Craig. Good morning, everyone. My name is Danielle Nielsen, and I'm the Manager of Housing Stability Services for both the City of St. Thomas and the County of Elgin. That's located in southwestern Ontario, for anyone who might not be aware, and we're actually a neighboring municipality to London, Ontario. I am also our Built for Zero lead, and we work closely with multiple community service providers to do the work that we're doing around ending both veterans and chronic homelessness. In particular, I'd like to acknowledge and thank the YWCA St. Thomas Elgin. We work closely with them to oversee our by name list as well as our data for Built for Zero. So that's certainly a partnership that's been a huge added value to the work that we've been doing locally. And it really is a commitment across all community service providers and stakeholders in St. Thomas Elgin, including our local council and our mayor. We frequently hear our mayor use Built for Zero language when he's addressing the community and the needs related to housing in St. Thomas Elgin, and that's a major asset for us. And just also want to acknowledge joining the community. I think it was my first week in the job that my director, Heather Sheridan, who's here this morning, asked me if I knew how to become a Built for Zero community, and I thought, okay, well, this community probably has what it takes then. So I'll hand it off.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Janelle Fleury. I'm manager with the Regional Municipality of Wood Buffalo, so Fort McMurray, Alberta. I work for the Community Partnerships and Initiatives branch, so we oversee the Community Plan on Homelessness. And in our community, we really partner closely with the Legion to end veteran homelessness, with our partner agencies, so the Center of Hope, YMCA Northern Alberta, Wood Buffalo Wellness Society, and the Salvation Army. I'd say it's been a really collective effort, and I'll let Kate speak a little more to that.
Good morning, everyone. I am Kate Kimball. I work with Janelle at the Regional Municipality of Wood Buffalo. I am the social program advisor, so I'm Janelle's data nerd sidekick today. So if anyone has data questions, you can certainly ask me. As Janelle mentioned, we do work quite closely with all of the agencies in our community. So my day-to-day role is working with those community partners in our agency who provide the frontline services for the vulnerable populations. We joined the Built for Zero world, I believe, in 2018, which feels like a decade ago. And we've been working on prioritizing and supporting the veteran population since 2020. So we have been doing this work for quite some time now and providing the support to the agencies who do that direct line of work. And we'll probably get to it later, but to what Janelle alluded to, one of the biggest successes that we've seen in our community from all aspects of what we do is that collaboration piece. So whether that be the Legions support and connecting to the representatives in Edmonton, because we may not have them in our community because we are in rural in the sense of distance from larger communities, or even just the connection points that the coordinated access points have in our community. We do have 14 coordinated access points in our community, which is a significant number for a community of our size. So just the collaboration is the biggest thing in our community when it comes to that veteran piece.
Good morning. My name is José Cormier, and I'm the veteran lead in Moncton, New Brunswick, which means that we have a designated one-person point of contact when somebody identifies as a veteran to connect them and start the process. The title came in 2022, and we've been going with it since then. And for our partners, we rely heavily on the Royal Canadian Legion, Veterans Affairs, and all our community partners. And we do so because we're all coordinated access, the by names list, and we really work as a team in all levels.
Thank you. So I now have some special questions for each panelist, and then also some questions for the whole panel, and then we'll turn it over to your questions. But Craig, I'm going to start with you. So London was the first community, well, you were among the first communities to sign up for Built for Zero functional, to sign up for the veteran community cohort. And you were the first to confirm a veteran quality by name list and confirm and announce Functional Zero. But your work with veteran homelessness began before that, and I wonder if you can share a little bit about that and why London thinks it's important to focus on veteran homelessness.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Marie. So as I mentioned earlier, our work at the city predates me working at the city. There was a lot of commitment. I'll start with that. London has historically been a center, if you will, for veterans. We've had a number of veterans and people in active service sort of work out of London. We have a Wolseley barracks, and it's evolved over the last number of decades and years, but it's always held a very important piece of London, our connections with armed forces. And so our community really started to see more veterans on the streets, see more veterans experiencing homelessness, and came together, as I mentioned earlier, initially as like a bit of a lunch and learn. We had a number of sessions where we were trying to get to really understand the data, right? Get to understand what we were seeing on the streets, really recognized how mobile veterans actually are, and really moving up and down the 401 corridor in Ontario from Windsor all the way up through to Ottawa. And we were starting to see sort of some of the cyclical things that you see with some other homeless populations, veterans kind of coming into the community, leaving the community, coming back to the community, and really connecting in through the Legions and other service providers. And so through our relationships and the kind of regular lunch and learns that we had, we kind of came together as a community and recognized, like, let's house some veterans, let's do this work. As Marie mentioned, we sort of really focused a lot on our data piece. We achieved a function or a quality by name list in early 2019, and then an advanced by name list in 2020, and then that led into the veterans piece. And we really were able to have the data that supported a lot of the work that we were doing. In addition, through some of the work we were doing, we had a really large residential development happening called Residencia Artonia, and it was about I think it's a 65 unit affordable housing build for seniors, but a real significant portion of that build, 10 units, was identified for veterans, as well as a common area and some in-unit supports. So that group was really, really committed to helping us support veterans, and so that was really a tipping point for us to achieve Functional Zero, because when that occupancy started for that development, we were able to then house a significant number of veterans in that month or in those 2-month period, and that kind of pushed us into Functional Zero, which, as you saw, we've kind of ebbed and flowed a little bit, but mostly maintained and continue to maintain since then. That really showed our community that we can do this, right? And so our kind of lunch and learn group evolved into what we call our Veterans Housing Advisory Committee. They meet monthly now. We're meeting bi-weekly at one point, but really kind of case managing all the veterans we knew on the streets and trying to solve some of the challenges that each veteran had, right? We were seeing veterans who just needed some connection to service to get some of the economic pieces that they needed to achieve housing, all the way through to veterans who had severe trauma, still significant PTSD, significant mental health and addictions challenges. And we really saw in our community, veterans, like they always do, very selflessly, right? They wanted other people to get help for themselves. And so our community and the relationship we were able to build with those veterans was super important, because they deserve help too. And so working through a lot of the relationship building was really key for that group. And then really connecting the health piece. So I mentioned Parkwood earlier as a historical veterans kind of hospital in London. They were really key because they brought to the table as well a number of health-related resources and beds in hospital to help assist some of the veterans who really needed some of that significant care get it. And so that helped us manage some of the high acuity and high support needs individuals, and then a connection with Veterans Affairs Canada and a number of other programs allowed us to manage sort of the economic housing day-to-day needs of individuals. And so we have a veterans lead in our community. It's an organization called London Cares. We have two dedicated veterans support workers, and they meet with the veterans who are housed, those who are unhoused, and really bring any challenges to our monthly table to talk about solutions, make sure that we're still meeting the need in our community, that we're planning for any additional resources. We still prioritize veterans in our community. That's why we're able to continually house folks. And so that really is what kickstarted the city, and we've been doing it kind of ever since.
Nice. Thank you. And I know if you're in our session yesterday, you know that before Craig's time, that London was involved in a big national sort of Housing First for Veterans research project, and that also really supported some of those folks to come together around the table and be aware of those issues. That's great. So as the longest standing community with a veteran Functional Zero, Craig, tell us what you have been learning about what it takes to sustain.
Sustaining is very difficult. That's what I've learned. It really takes the commitment of your community. It was nice to have the accolades and the press and all that stuff when you've achieved Functional Zero, but the hard work is really after that, right? It is really having your community maintain that commitment, maintain prioritizing veterans, and ensuring that the pathways and the relationships that we've built in the past continue on, and that any new vets that we see, because we recognize the very mobile nature of vets, that we are building that relationship. And so for us, housing has been a challenge in our community. Housing prices have been a significant challenge in our community. Really supporting the vets with their choice of housing and what that looks like, right? We have a traditional understanding of, an apartment and a key, and a door and stuff. But we did find a number of vets who were self-supporting in long-term stay motels. So they really met the definition of housing. That's where they wanted to stay. It's where they wanted to live. And so we really were able to work with our federal counterparts to ensure that those folks are still being counted as housed, because for all intents and purposes, they are. That's where they want to stay. They can afford and maintain that housing. They have a key. They have rights, and they're really excited to stay there. So we were just able to continue to support them. And so with our community, every kind of build that we have for affordable housing, we still focus on veterans. We try to get a number of units for veterans. Our Legion actually has taken quite a lead on that and work with nonprofit providers. We have a number of developments that have 3 and 4 and 5 units for veterans, because we're seeing a number of vets that want to have that camaraderie, right? Stay closer to other vets, live closer to other vets, rely on that community. And then we have some vets who want to kind of live in the scattered site model. So we have units where they can be independent and still be supported how they need to.
Great. Thank you. Thanks very much. So Danielle, over to you. St. Thomas Elgin was the second community to reach Functional Zero, and you are located next to London. I think sometimes people are curious how you folks, did that have any influence, and then how are you folks working together, if you're working together at all?
Sure, yeah, happy to speak to that. So it's probably fair to share with you that prior to joining the St. Thomas Elgin team, I was a member of Craig Cooper's team when they were starting to endure that work around reaching Functional Zero on veterans' homelessness. So I think there definitely was some cross-learning and sharing that presented itself to the work that we've done in St. Thomas Elgin. In addition to that, we also, because we're neighboring municipalities, we share the same Built for Zero advisor, and we share the same partners in the Royal Canadian Legion and Veterans Affairs Canada. And so I think with London having gone before us, those folks were well seasoned in what it took for a community to reach that significant milestone. But probably in fairness to my community, I can't give London all the credit. We have worked diligently and quite hard to achieve this milestone. And with real dignity and pride and commitment. I think when the question was posed to the community around whether or not this was work we wanted to dive into, the response was yes, and right now. And they have proven that dedication has existed throughout. So we've worked really hard as well to set up a veteran lead in our community and to support our service providers in prioritizing vets and really looking at how they're screening to ensure that vets are being identified in our system. Prior to this work, I can share with you that we were not identifying through our screening questions any veterans. And after engaging with Built for Zero and local RCL and Veterans Affairs Canada's partners, we changed the way that we screened, and we immediately began identifying vets, prioritizing them and getting them housed, and that commitment is well and alive today. But we have continued our work with London, being neighbors, because I think this demonstrates that these successes can actually be regional if you pull together and you work together as a team. And so some of the ways that we've attempted to stay connected to London is that we were invited to sit at their Veterans Housing Advisory Committee table. So we're now an active participant there. And most recently, we did a joint application for Veterans Program funding to roll out, hopefully, a Housing First program that includes rent supplements for veterans in both the London and the St. Thomas Elgin area. So those would be a couple of examples I would share about how this work really could be a regional approach.
Perfect, thank you. So I wonder if you could share, I think you have some ambitious sort of next steps where you'd like to go in your sustaining, if you could tell us about that.
We do, yes. So I would agree with Craig's comments about the work really just getting started when you reach Functional Zero. In our community, we've taken the approach that's really where the rubber hits the road. And so we've been working diligently to keep our priorities around veterans alive and well through our coordinated access meetings and connecting with local partners. And through that, we've actually been able to sustain absolute zero in our community for a number of months. And so our work with Built for Zero right now is around exploring and looking into what it might mean to be confirmed for absolute zero. And so we're really excited about that work, and it's maintained momentum and commitment across our community. So we're looking forward to that next milestone.
Yeah. Excited about that idea of can we identify so early and get ahead of this that you are just really preventing, and can we just push that up so folks aren't experiencing it at all? It's interesting, inspiring. Thank you. All right, Janelle and Kate. Fort McMurray and the surrounding area has a population of just over 100,000 people, and your numbers of veterans are relatively small. Since 2020, you've identified 14 and housed 12, with a few moving to inactive. But I wanted to ask you, because people often say, like, the numbers are so small, this doesn't mean anything, why is this important? Like, why is focusing on and reaching functional zero veteran homelessness important and still a big accomplishment?
It's a really good question. So our community is 106,000, including our shadow population. That means that our fly-in, fly-out workers who work in the oil sands, our core community is about 76,000, so it is small. And that number is reflective of our size. However, the impact is still significant. The accomplishment is still big, because it took the same amount of work to make sure that we had a system that was set up to prioritize veterans and to react quickly. Of the 12 that we housed in the last 3 years, 5 of those have been this year. And so when we were in the works of confirming veteran homelessness for a long time, because we actually had sustained zero for about a year, we had a veteran who came into our system just at that point that we were about to confirm. So that was a pressure test, and we were able to house that person, not us, but our partners in the community, really quickly. And then after the work was done of confirming, we had 4 in 1 month. And we were still able to respond in our community to that pressure test of getting them all housed within that 1 month. And so we know that we are set up to do that work, regardless if it's 12 or 100. And so I think taking that work and then scaling that, our community now knows that we've accomplished this, we can keep it going, but also now we can take that work and apply it to reaching chronic functional zero. So it has been an amazing collaboration in our community. As I mentioned, we work really closely with the with the Legion, who is our touch point for Veterans Affairs. And then our community agencies who are doing the frontline work, they're the ones housing, they're the ones staying in touch with the Legion as well. It was such a meaningful accomplishment for them to see that there is an outcome to this work. And so we actually, when we were doing the news release, had requested to get a picture with the mayor, because we wanted this to really be something that the community could see the work that was going into this and be proud of. And when we went to the mayor's office, there was about 20 of us, which was not what he expected. But it was just a celebration for everyone to be recognized and how they're working together to do that, and that work needs to continue. So again, whether it's 100 or 10, it's the same amount of partnership.
Thank you so much. So we're going to pass it along to Jose, unless Kate, you wanted to say a few things too?
Yeah, the only thing that I wanted to add here is to echo what Janelle just said. So what this did for us, it was almost like a mini PDSA. And we realized after the fact, like, we had the opportunity to plan. We had the opportunity to review and what works, what doesn't, to be able to further apply to other populations. And it really highlighted and identified what we can do in our community when we work together. There was 15 community partners that worked on the whole process of this, not including Built for Zero, which speaks volumes, I think. So, yeah.
Wonderful. And so PDSA means Plan, Do, Study, Act, and it's just a method of making improvement in your community. So you tested something out. Yeah, wonderful. All right, Jose, you work directly with veterans experiencing homelessness, including helping them to confirm their veteran status through the Royal Canadian Legion, or VAC, accessing veteran-specific and homelessness-specific resources, and supporting them to find and retain housing. So please tell us a little bit about what you're finding important to keep in mind when you're working with veterans and supporting them to end their homelessness.
Good question. So for my observation, very quickly, as an outreach worker, I encountered my first veteran, which I was shocked was happening in our community. So that prompted me to look for resources to help them. And then what happened is everyone in community started to do this on their own. There was no, it wasn't organized. It was a mess, basically. And to learn how to navigate Veterans Affairs and the politics behind it and what people are entitled to and how you get that done, that was very complicated. So we were missing a lot of veterans. They were falling through the cracks. So that's when the veteran lead came in and started. So what we did is we made sure that everyone who's serving the homeless population that we use the same question, which is, have you served, not served, but have you completed the basic training, or have you been enrolled with the RCMP? Because again, it's a lot of the time is self-use. So once we got that done, everyone was on the same page, then having one person to go to and getting the initial connection worked really well for us. There was a lot of less time wasted doing it that way. And then I've learned very quickly that the veteran population is very different than everyone else experiencing homelessness. They come with their barriers, but they also come with a lot of support. So I wanted to make sure that all my veterans had the opportunity to really be connected and get what they deserved. So it was to adjust how I did outreach myself to be able to connect veterans and everyone else, but especially with working in the field. They're really proud, really big on respect, and every veteran is different. Every veteran wants and needs something different, so it's really like start from scratch every time you have a new veteran and really like see what they need. And then I took it a step further because I realized that I always like to test the water, right? Like, you need IDs, this is the information, let me know when it's done. And then I would follow up, and then it wasn't done. So then I thought, okay, there's a bigger problem. And then I realized, because us in Moncton, a lot of our veterans are more like elderly. So then I realized that a lot of them don't have the natural supports. They don't have family members. Some of them never had kids, or even if they did, trauma happened and they're all by themselves. So really having a trusty person to go with them. I need help with my bank account. I've never had an email address in my life. I call VAC and they want to set up a VAC account, and that alone is a barrier. Then having like the soft hand, like, I'm going to show you, we're going to get this together, and all of a sudden like being able to have a case manager assigned, and then finally having that voice. And I don't know, also in our city, I noticed too, I also do a little bit of diversion as well, where, for example, like Veterans Affairs or the Legion will refer to me veterans in needs, and sometimes it's, I don't have a printer and I want to apply for the, oh my God, what is it called? The, no, the,
Social assistance.
where they go like for psychologists and stuff, the rehab treatment, not the rehab, but the, yeah, there you go. So like to learn all the things, but to feel like they're not alone, and they have people. And also another thing that I realized really quickly that made such a difference for people is the anger. So like a lot of the times they're, not all, but some are angry just because they've been trying to navigate the system by themselves and they're not getting anywhere, and it's really stressful on top of managing their whole life. So I had to really do like damage control, coaching on how to like make a phone call, like calling Service Canada, for example. We all know how difficult that is on your best day, never mind when you don't have your basic needs met, right? So, but having somebody where it's like, I take away the pressure, makes a huge difference. And this is where we see the continuum to housing a lot better than just when they're on their own.
Thanks so much, Jose. You know, I think, thank you so much for sharing that. I think, you know, you're sort of speaking to, I think, you know, the homelessness response sector has not traditionally understood sort of the veteran service sector, and may or may not have had partnerships with Royal Canadian Legion or VAC and be familiar. And so I think you're sort of speaking to how much learning it took. Thinking about the, you know, unique needs of veterans, and yeah, so thank you for that. It leads nicely into our next question for the whole panel, which is like how and why is it important for the homelessness sector to work closely with the veteran service organizations to support veterans experiencing homelessness? We'll start that way.
No worries. So just for an example, our Royal Canadian Legion, they have a program and it's called, it's a mission, Operation Leave the Streets Behind. And by partnering up with them, which they get a lot of their funding is through the Poppy campaign, they can help, like we get connected with the Legion. That's my first stop, because of that program, they assess the need immediately. So for example, it could be that I have arrears for NB Power or social assistance, but it could also be, like for an example, I have one working right now, he would fall everywhere, and it's because he didn't have the proper eyewear, and he actually needs like a specialist to see his eyes. That was all funded by the Legion while we are in the continuum for housing. So just having that complete transformation for that veteran, but to connect with the proper like Veterans Affairs for emergency funds and all that is really crucial. And by connecting with the partners, that's where you learn to make plans. So like through my whole work, I can't stress this enough, it's all about the plan. Even applying for emergency funds, like and then that you get that knowledge by talking with the community partners, but it's crucial. When I first started my position, almost all the veterans that were experiencing homelessness would tell me, like, don't talk to me about Veterans Affairs, absolutely not. And then by asking questions, they keep denying me. But then when we look at the history, they applied, for example, like, I need $2,000 for clothes. Well, $2,000 might be too much. But if you have a plan assigned and the right amount that makes sense, then you get places, right? So it was really to help them also learn the process through partners, like what is available, what is not, what considers you. That was enormous. Even like finding, because if they are, like, if there's any issues with like mental health, to go see and speak to a counselor, for example, if the counselor is not aware or didn't receive any training to deal with veterans, they feel very disconnected and they stop. So like that alone, I was able to find one that is qualified through the Royal Canadian Legion. So like reaching out expands your network, absolutely.
Yeah, drawing on those partners with that experience and who for many years have been working on, preventing and ending veteran homelessness as well. And I just wanted to say, Jose, you didn't share, but you would go to their meetings and, yeah, do you want to just say something about that?
Yeah, so not only did I connect on the ground, but I also wanted to make sure that I connected on the back. So the first thing I did is my first veteran, when I connected the first time with Veterans Affairs, the first case manager I spoke to, I asked her to speak with her boss. And then her boss, I explained my program, and I ended up attending their case managers' monthly meetings, and it really explaining and creating. So now when a veteran is assigned case manager, we already know each other. So that's so much easier. And so that is an example. But as well as because any healthy relationship, it's one thing to create relationships in community, but it's really a give and take. So you can't just always take. Eventually they get tired. So I really make sure, for example, for the Poppy campaign, as a veteran lead that I'm always at the Legion, I made sure I volunteered to help out, and we invite all partners, when we have events, for example, the Respect Forum, we make sure that all the people at the right table, they feel welcome, and it's a great way to navigate veteran services, and yeah.
So some things you've been doing around partnership building, and what can we do? What can you do? What can we do? How can we work together? Nice. Thanks. Yeah.
Just wanting to build on Jose's comments about the support you receive around navigating the resources in the system itself. Our experience has been that there's a level of knowledge and expertise that exists within the Royal Canadian Legion and Veteran Affairs Canada related to things like what it means to have served your country or military culture and other sensitivities that you might not be aware of if you yourself haven't experienced or lived that life. And so the example I would share with you was the support that we received from our CL and VAC around how to screen for veteran status really changed the way that we engaged our community, and we wouldn't have been able to make those changes or adjustments without that level of knowledge and expertise. So it's a huge asset and something that is definitely critical to this work.
So as Kate had mentioned earlier, because our community is small and remote, we don't have any other veteran supports other than our local Legion. So that is really crucial to have that relationship with them. They're our link to Veterans Affairs Canada, and we actually were able this year in our community, the Legion was able to secure a Veterans Affairs representative that works out of the Legion. So that's been really significant. They know the needs of the people that they are serving, who have served with them. And so I think that's key as well. And they know when an individual is at risk, which will be critical when we move forward into that prevention of veteran homelessness to sustain, that communication is open all the time, and then we're not seeing people flow into the system, but rather we're catching it earlier.
Just a couple points to add for our community. I think, recognizing the collaboration and sharing the stories across our community has been very helpful to have the organizations work together, right? As a service manager in Ontario, we're building housing, we're providing services for homeless prevention as a sort of systems manager, but sharing those stories and sharing the resources and the conversations through our local networks and then having the connections made has been really significant. It's really started to see like we can do this for people who are being discharged from hospital. We can do this from people who are being discharged from corrections. We can take some of these principles and apply them to other sections of our homeless populations. With some tweaks in that, it'll work, right? And the difficulty we've gone through, I think every community on navigating that sort of federal system and how to connect the veterans to the resources that they deserve, those principles can apply to many other challenging systems as well. So I think that's why it's super important for other homeless serving sectors or housing service agencies to prioritize veterans and be part of our broader community conversation.
That segue. So this is my final question for the panel, and then we'll open it up to the folks in the audience. But you segued very nicely into like, what have you learned from this experience of functional zero and sustaining for veterans that you think you can apply to other populations? So I don't know if you have anything to add, Craig.
Yeah. So we had a good conversation in our community kind of around, how we look back and how do we do this, right? How do we achieve functional zero? What was the special sauce, right? How did it happen? And so we really kind of did a deep dive in our community and through our partners to kind of understand some of the key principles that we need to bring to other sectors. And so we have a no fixed address program, and you mentioned Dr. Forchuk previously on the VETS research project, but she's also done some homelessness research with hospitals. And so a lot of those principles we're bringing to that work. And so we're working with corrections in our community and our Indigenous populations as well, right? Trying to recognize and bring that group together to collaborate and bring in all the right key partners. For us in our community, we're really focusing on housing as healthcare, and a lot of the folks that we see with a lot of needs in our community really need that link, right? So yes, it's housing, but it's also those supports and those health-related supports coming to the table. And so we've been able to do that with the vets quite effectively, and so now we're trying to apply those principles to other areas in our community to have hopefully similar successes.
I would agree with everything that Craig has shared around the learning, and would add that it's critical for there to be alignment. And what I mean by that is that a lot of this work is driven by the fact that the federal government has made a commitment to ending veterans' homelessness. And so at a provincial level and then a municipal level, there's opportunity there to align. And with that commitment also came resources. And so when we look at how we apply this to other demographics, it's important to look at those commitments from higher levels of government and resources being brought to the table to do that really critical work. And then in addition to that, I just want to highlight again the support that comes from Built for Zero in doing this work. By committing into the veteran cohort and both the chronic cohort, it opens up this opportunity for cheerleading and coaching and advising and guiding. And similarly, I think that's transferable to other demographics. And so it's really a pathway or an example that starts the work around ending all homelessness in our country. And it's been great to be a part of that work.
I would, again, echo everything that's already been said, and I think things that I've already said today when it comes to some of the lessons that we've learned. But the biggest one for us, I'd say that this work is not a side-of-the-desk job. That's something I think Built for Zero has been saying for years, and I think it was until this point that we actually realized it. Reaching veteran functional zero cannot be done on the side of your desk. Reaching chronic homelessness cannot be done as a side-of-the-desk effort. Something that we actually learned was we were sitting on functional veteran homelessness for probably a year before we actually even realized that we were there, because we didn't necessarily put the work in to check all the boxes to make sure that we had done our due diligence. But in that process, over the span of the year, had the dedicated staff to actually look into that work and make sure that all of the policies were there, the procedures were there, our standards of practice were there, which is great. On paper, we have everything that we need to make sure that we're reaching these goals. But until we actually come together, collaborate, and prioritize the one common goal, we're not going to get there. And to add, for the collaboration piece, Janelle and I are essentially the stage managers of what happens in our community when it comes to homelessness. The agencies, the community partners and the stakeholders are really the ones that are doing the work. So until we're all on the same page, we're not really going to achieve those goals or that commonality. And the last piece that I'd like to add for us was, because on paper, everything's great in our community. We have, like I said, the policies and the procedures. Our by name list has 60 different touch points per person on how to prioritize. Our by name list essentially prioritizes itself. But until we can identify what the priority is, we aren't able to reach those goals because we're sort of all over the place. So I think that's something that we'd like to put into place going forward, is using what we have learned, what we need, and the community collaboration to reach another population, to reach another goal.
And for ourselves, another one thing that I will, because I echo everything they've said now, but another thing is just to keep going. It's not to give up, keep going. There's a lot of turnovers in the field, as we all know, but is to continue their great work, apply pressure as needed, and challenge some things too, like when you have something that it should be a thing and it's not, talking to the right people, like, of course, complaining about it on the side with coworkers just change nothing, but like really take it where it needs to be and push for change. And I can't stress enough again, like, it's all about the plan. When people like to see you've done the background and then this is the presentation, a lot more people are open to change. So yeah.
Nice. Can kind of show that pathway and, I was going to say something else to something you said, Janelle, but yeah. Others, you heard it. She said some great things in there, some wonderful quotes. So big cheers to the panel. We're now going to turn it over to you folks for questions, and I will bring the mic. If you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, Kathleen O'Neill. I'm from Powell River, British Columbia. City of about 12,000, a regional district of 22,000. We have a very vibrant Legion community in our Legion group in our community. For the last 10 years, I was astounded when I looked at what VETS does, because that's exactly the kind of program I run just for. It's all needs-based. We're housing loss prevention. I'm wondering, you're talking about federal support for municipalities in doing this work? Where do I find that? How do I guide my city to that, like my city council to that? How are you funded?
Yeah, and I think every province is a little bit different, and some of these communities get federal funding and some don't. I know we're talking, Danielle, in the Ontario context. Yeah. But Danielle, I wonder if you actually want to speak, just because you don't get federal funding, and that would be Powell River's situation as well.
Yes, no, we're not a Reaching Home community, unfortunately. We hope to be one day. Okay. So for Reaching Home, maybe I could turn over to a colleague to give you more details about that. I was speaking more to the funds that become available through the Royal Canadian Legion and Veteran Affairs Canada when a vet is confirmed. Yes.
Yeah, so London regional community, probably about well over 400,000. We do receive Reaching Home funding from the federal government, and part of our Housing Stability Action Plan has identified prioritized veterans, our coordinated access system, and the work we do with our community is prioritize veterans. And so we've allocated dollars to support veterans through those programs, and the case management piece, right, that then leads into getting the connections with the Veterans Affairs Canada, getting connections with the Legions. We have had some really strong leadership at the Legions as well. We have a strong community as well, and there's really two folks that have really driven the bus on the veterans piece with our Legions, and so without them, we would never get to where we are today. That funding has allowed us to then support, like I say, the caseworkers on the front line with our London Cares organization, and that's kind of how that funding's helped. A little bit of that funding's really helped get a significant result.
So good morning, everyone. Thanks all the panelists. It was amazing. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tracy. I'm the Associate Director of Org Code Consulting and currently working here in the Halifax area, which is our brand new home. But beyond all that, most importantly for this session is that I am a veteran spouse. So we spent 23 years traveling wherever the Canadian Forces needed us to be. And one of the things that I think would be amazing, and hopefully you'll take this into account, the work that I do in Ottawa on a volunteer basis, in terms of the veteran working group, is really trying to focus not just on veterans, but also veteran families. So in Canada, unlike the United States, we only have a campaign to end veteran homelessness, not veterans and their family homelessness. So just imploring people to acknowledge the fact that you have veteran spouses that are in VAW shelters and homelessness shelters. You have veteran kids, which we refer to as brats, meaning they're born, raised, and transferred somewhere, that have a higher level of disability than the general population, that are indeed experiencing homelessness right across the country. Don't forget your veteran families. If the Veteran Affairs and D&D actually did a better job of taking care of families, you probably wouldn't have as many veteran homelessness issues as we currently have. So if you want to really look at what does veteran family-centered services look like, Ottawa's doing a great job. We've got some trauma-informed care training that we do that is not just around veteran homelessness. It is around veterans and their families. So connect. Aisha's here. But focus in on it. If it's not just veterans. In the wee hours of the morning, Veterans Affairs is not with your spouse. So.
I've been divorced twice because of it.
Yep.
Just to really add to that, Tracy, you make a great point there, and it jogs my memory too with some of the work we've done in our community around asking the question too of folks do you have family who's served, right? Because there are resources available that came up through a number of the veterans that we've supported that, wow, family does have a lot of supports, and it is just trying to make that connection and recognize and educate those family members on what they actually have available to them, especially the counseling piece. I was floored when we kind of stumbled on that gem.
Yeah. But just to be really clear that in terms of Veteran Affairs and D&D, the veteran families and the serving families actually do not have as many benefits. So if the veteran's not with the individual, and I've actually, unfortunately, heard a number of veteran serving organizations that will openly say, we don't serve veteran families. We only serve veterans. It's like, are you freaking kidding me? So it's one of those very few areas when we think about human health and social service delivery that I have to say that the Americans actually do a way better job than we do. And so I think there's an opportunity to change that regardless of the fact that Veterans Affairs is currently, spending a lot of money around veteran homelessness. They would actually do a much better job if they looked at veterans and families. So remember that in your communities.
Tracy, thanks very much for raising up that issue and bringing that forward. I really appreciate that. Aisha, I do want to give you a chance at some point just to share what's going on in Ottawa, because you recently got a quality by name list. You've been doing a lot of work on this. I want to give you a chance to speak as well if you want, but I'm going to turn it over to here first. Is that okay?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for the, it was great. I got a question on the by name list, and so I don't know if it's the panel or in work with homeless veterans in Montreal. We think we're very close to achieving functional zero also in Montreal, but we want to get the data to. But my question about the data, I think it may be that in Quebec, the confidentiality laws are more stricter than anywhere else in Canada. So a by name list, how does it go about with different organizations bringing in the names? Because in Quebec, we would have to get the consent forms from the veteran for every organization that will see that list to that be signed, and even coordinated access we're working on in Montreal, but it's because of the different laws too, it becomes very, very difficult and stuff. So as a service worker, I don't like it. As a citizen of Quebec, I'm really happy for the confidentiality laws. But
I'll start, and maybe the panel can add their context. So in Ontario, our by name list really is you have to have consent signed. So we have a standard form consent that our community has worked to develop and identify with a number of organizations. We have over 40 organizations who are key access points to our coordinated access in our community. So every organization's on there. And the individual is aware of when that changes, who those organizations are, and works with the organization to understand and then sign consent. And so with our by name list, right, it's people who have experienced access to service within the last 90 days and have signed consent. So those are really the two key pieces for us. And then within that 90 days, that's our by name list. And so that's how we kind of work with our community on managing that. Consent's always a huge issue in our community as well, and we've gone through a number of iterations of our consent form. It's something that's always brought up at our regional and community meetings, ensuring that, what is our timeline to, revisit the consent with an individual? Is it 6 months? Is it a year? When somebody goes out of service and then they come back, we want to renew the consent. So it's a valid concern, and it's something that we're trying to manage and address in London.
In Quebec, like to have a list of the 40 names on one consent form, we wouldn't be able to do it. And so it would be individual forms that would need to be done.
I don't know if this is helpful to you because it's relevant to Ontario as well, but people can enter into our by name list without consent, and then they identify as a number, but you could still see their priority statuses. So if it said veteran, Indigenous, chronic, which would give our community partners the opportunity to say, these are our priorities, let's circle around this person, and then individually work with that person to say, hey, we think we can get you attached to a rent supplement. Are you okay? Would you give consent to talk to social services, for example, as opposed to the full coordinated access service providers.
Okay, and just for getting to the Build for Zero, are you guys able to, if we need to adapt some of the data and how it's brought and stuff to face a reality of Quebec, that's possible to be done? Yeah. Okay.
I just wanted to add as well that I think sometimes we have heard in our community that for veterans, the by name list or signing any form of consent form is a barrier. And so some of them do not want to give their name. But I implore you not to give up, because we did have an individual that was living rough who said no, 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 and then finally yes, and he's housed. So it is a concern, but it's possible.
I did just want to add that, Marie, like if you wanted to share any of the information that we've provided, I know some of our consent forms are public. We've spent a long time working on what that looks like in our community. It is one consent form with probably 20 different agencies listed on it, but we have policies and procedures on how often they have to be updated and what that looks like and what to do if someone doesn't sign consent. So you're more than welcome to reach out. We've spent a lot of time working on some of these, and it's not a one-size-fits all, but we're here to talk if you ever have any questions.
And I agree, the list can definitely be long. However, how we do it is they have options to check off. So for example, like, yes, you can talk to anyone, but I don't have a good relationship with John Howard Society example. Well, then we will get everyone. And then, like, especially for veterans, like you get a consent form for the Legion, Veterans Affairs, those are your main ones. And anything community-wide that you have to reach out, you get usually the consent from, like, I'll get a veteran to sign my consent form for my agency, which kind of helps when you have a person, right? Because I sign the consent for, like, all the things, all the other partners. But the two major ones is those, the by names list, Veterans Affairs, the Legion, and then after that, it's going through the journey with them. Like, I need a dentist, okay, then you call together. So, like, the rest kind of, like, sets on its own type thing.
Yeah, it's not necessarily getting the veterans to sign the consent, because we already do that with Veterans Affairs. All of that's no problem. It's just the laws in Quebec are extremely strict when it comes to consent, and they do not allow even to check off, even the, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, of course, it's different in every province, and every community works that out with their local privacy officer. And definitely consent is never said and done. The laws are constantly changing. People are continuing to learn and improve how they're doing that work. So it's ongoing work. Aisha, did you want to say? Is that okay?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Is this working? It's on. Yep. Okay. Okay, here we go. So my name is Aisha Farouk, and I'm a program coordinator from the City of Ottawa. And I have the pleasure of working with two wonderful people in this room. One is Tracy, who has really helped us develop a framework for our veterans. We call it. So I'll just go through two of the things that I want to highlight right now. So one is we have a veterans working group, and what that is a collaboration between veteran service agencies, so the Legion and Vets Canada, Soldiers Helping Soldiers. We also have some outreach component and some of our veteran agencies. And one of those agencies is the Ottawa Mission, which Kristen Schilke is here today with us. And Kristen is the manager of a new position that we created in Ottawa. It's called the Veterans Caseworker. And that caseworker is dedicated solely to veterans. So they're housed out of the Ottawa Mission, and Kristen, and his name is Frank, and he's very passionate about veterans. He couldn't be here today, but that has been a huge success, and we've seen a decrease in veterans. Frank works with all of the partners in the working group, as well as our shelter system and our agencies. And Frank also does case management and does all the things that you guys were talking about, the document readiness, the health piece, the housing piece, and he's very successful at it. In Ottawa, we're really fortunate to have a Veterans House, which is a 42-unit supportive housing building for veterans, which is located on the Rockcliffe Air Base in Ottawa, which we don't use anymore, but it's kind of fitting. And they do have community development, they have supports going in, so it's a really kind of a good place for people, and they enjoy living there. Frank has made such a great connection with Veterans House that now when a unit comes up, they notify Frank. So it's been a great partnership. The other thing that I just wanted to touch on was Ottawa. We're the capital city, and we do really, we're thinking holistically about families as well, because like Tracy was saying, we see that there's family breakdown and it affects everybody. So we're in the process of working with our Canadian Morale Services and our crisis line to develop some partnerships and possibly some programs that will help the whole family. So when we talk about doing this work off the side of our desk, we all do. And I'm the lead for the veterans programs right now, but there's a lot of people who have contributed to Ottawa's framework. And I think that our success, and Tracy, you could probably agree, and Kristen too, has been our collaboration. We've learned so much, and we've really had, ups and downs, but I think we're getting there. And it's something that the City of Ottawa has prioritized. The mayor has a task force for veterans, so we are kind of like an umbrella to that task force.
Hello, my name is Brian Hilson. I'm a veteran. 2 tours of Afghanistan, 1 to Haiti. And I didn't know what I was going to say. I just popped in here because the universe brought me here again. But I will say that I found out what that reason is here, and the reason is family. And I'll tell you this right now, since my last deployment to Afghanistan, I've been divorced twice because my spouses couldn't figure out what was wrong with my head. And they did the normal thing that all spouses would do and try and motivate you and get you going, but it doesn't work with us. Because when we get in the states that we're in, we close up like this because we don't want any of you to experience what we experience. And it doesn't even have to be anything that we do specifically. Just when you go to a place like Afghanistan, which is literally the center of all war on the planet, just the dark energy that you come home with from there is enough to traumatize you. And then you're sitting there with your family, your wife, your kids, your brothers, sisters. Nobody knows what to do with you. My mom actually sent her mother and my grandfather to my house to try and get them to convince me that I had to go out and get a job because I couldn't sit at home and do nothing. But they didn't realize that all of my doctors and everybody that I was seeing was telling me to stay home and do nothing because I couldn't be trusted out in public. And that's the truth. I'm not going to lie, guys. Most of us, guys like me, we don't trust ourselves in public. And that's why we stay home. That's why you don't see us. That's why when you go looking for us, you can't find us. Because some of us don't trust ourselves. And that's just the reality. You can't train us to do the jobs that we do and then just send us out on the street and not teach us how to undo that. I'm literally one of those people that was trained to do the worst thing that you can do to a human being, and then I wasn't told how to stop myself from wanting to do that afterwards. And I can't explain that to my wife. I can't explain that to my kids. My kids still don't quite understand it. They just sit there and be like, oh, dad's just dad. But I have also worked myself out of the foxhole, we call it, so that I have the strength to talk to you people the way that I am right now. But I'm like one of the only ones. There's not a lot of us that can do this, especially ones that come through the combat range like I did. Like I know so many of my friends, the guy that I lift weights with every morning, he comes in every morning just fuming and has no real reason or understanding why, and he can't even explain that to his family. And when the families get sick of it, gone. And then that's where homeless starts. after all of the mental, all the alcohol. That's the other thing too. I'm going to interject that right into here. Military members from the past were almost indoctrinated into alcoholism. And then on top of that, they were given pills to sort their brain out, but they don't mix with the alcohol. There's where the suicide comes in. Alcohol, pills. So for decades, we've been training soldiers to deal with their issues by drinking them away. And then all of a sudden, 10 years ago, it was not okay to do that, and they just started giving them pills. But just like all alcoholics, you can't just wean them off of that. And then here comes the spouses again, not knowing why their husband and just can't stop drinking. So more services for the families. There is a lot of services out there. My family has gotten a lot of support. But you're right. They look at the spouses and say, we're not here for you. I've had Veterans Affairs caseworkers look at my spouse and say, it doesn't matter. We're here for him. What happens to you doesn't matter. And that has to change because like we all know, a community is a family and a family is what keeps everything strong. And that's what we have to protect nowadays more than anything, not even just with veterans. Look at what everybody's doing to the family unit these days. They're trying to tear our fucking family units down. And that's what needs to change. We have to pull the family up with the veteran and train the spouses a little bit better on how to deal with the mental issues that come with it, because it's the only way you're gonna stop the spiral down all the way the hill after they get divorced. Because when a veteran loses their family, that's what we go over to protect. We're overseas so that nothing happens to our family and nothing happens to any of you. And when that's taken away from us, we have nothing. So please, more family work.
Thank you for
Thank
sharing.
you. Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you for your service. Very sorry for the emotional toll that had, but
It was my choice.
congratulations on your recovery.
It's my choice. I do it again.
I think one thing that we've taken home that's resonated from this week is that the need for lived experience at the decision-making tables is huge. And so I know it's a further emotional tax to ask that, but I think if you have the opportunity to be included in those decisions, to be at the table representing lived experience, it would be really helpful.
Yes, thank you for sharing your story. You were in another, as you said, you're working at the conference center here and happened to be in our session and just shared really powerful and honest and hard truths with us, and we really, really appreciate that, and thank you for your service.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
The universe brought me here. That's all I can say. Go where it tells me.
Oh.
So thanks for all your comments. Thanks for your presentations and so forth. One of the questions I have, because you've talked a lot about sort of the systemic aspect of what's different about working with veterans. Again, my name is Wally Czech. I'm part of the Canadian Alliance, but I'm wondering. And you mentioned, Craig, the secret sauce. I'm kind of looking at that question from a bit of a different angle. What would any of you who have spoken today say is different about working with veterans than the rest of the homeless population, so that makes it successful? I get, the things about, connections and partnerships with Veteran Affairs and so forth. You just mentioned peers, but the peers and everything, that's important in all aspects of ending homelessness, right? So what would you say, and assuming that you had the greatest system, the greatest case managers, everybody's doing everything they're supposed to do, what would be some of the nuances about what's different about working with veterans to help them be successful in ending their homelessness than the rest of the homeless population?
So by nuances, you mean like challenging?
No, things, strategies, practices, those things. What would you do differently for veterans than you would with someone else in your community who is chronically homeless?
So for myself, it's really to look at each individual, and it's to give them that chance for that voice. A lot, like I said, the anger. A lot of the times, that's the one thing that you see. a lot of the times I'll connect with a veteran where all the doors in community are closed. There's no one that's willing to even give that person a chance because the way the approach was done, the frustration. So like one thing for me that I always get from my clients is you give me the ability to feel safe, because if they're like, sometimes I have coworkers that will knock on my door and say, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Oh, we're having a conversation." But it's because when I see the anger surface, I don't take that personal. It's not about me. It's about the whole situation, and it's such a big situation, and I just give them a platform, and then I present options, and then I go with them. I help along the way. A lot of the times, well, when you're in survival mode, when you're highly emotional and anger, when you're stuck with that anger, you're emotional all day long. We attended a session yesterday. Gentleman explained really how the brain will become trapped when that door is open for anger. So they get frustrated themselves with their anger. And I feel like eventually they have that, "I'm going to push you and see how far you can go before you give up on me." I see that very often, which again is just about like small steps, baby steps. I always say, as soon as I encounter one, I'm like, you know, when you want to climb on top of the roof, the ladder doesn't have 3 steps. It has multiple, because you're going to spend all day trying to catch the first one. And it's very much like that. They will come and they're like, "I need A to Z immediately," and it's like to reassure that we're gonna get all that done, but let's focus on what you think is most important, and you just start with that, one thing at a time. Very easy, really important to go really slow, because it's fast moving. Once I encounter, I will say like, brace yourself, because housing will come within the next 45 days, as much as possible, right? And that includes all the service in between. So like, it's really important, take your time as soon as, and I'm really like, it comes with experience as well, but I can tell when it's going too fast, and then we slow down, and it's to highlight the success, the small success, because once you restore hope in somebody that, you know what, I'm here, but I can get to here with the proper supports, that's where you win, right? That's where, it doesn't mean they're not gonna be relapse and setbacks and all these things, but that's how you get them to believe that things can be done, and they have a full support. They're not alone.
I would just add a comment, sort of looking at it more from a system level, a nuance that I've experienced in prioritizing it in collaboration, of course, with our community, is that I don't need to explain it. We have multiple priorities in our community that we're working with in terms of matching people to resources, and often with other priorities, you can be matched with the question of why that population over another. And at least in my work in St. Thomas Elgin, there's not that same pushback with veterans. I think that most Canadians, if not all, have a connection to veterans and to what veterans have sacrificed for us. And so I would share with you that that's a nuance that I've experienced. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to add, I was just going to say stigma, right? That's veterans generally in our community in London, right? That people want to work with them, people want to support them, and that's not the same with every population we deal with, right? So you could be dealing with a veteran who has an addictions issue, as we heard, no problem. But if I'm dealing with a non-veteran who has an addictions issue, I'm not touching with a 10-foot pole. That's the difference I would suggest, if I need to put a finger on it, is the different types of stigma that our folks we serve and try to help deal with on a daily basis, because they're starting from a deficit in many cases.
Sure, I'll just. So the one thing that Frank, our veteran caseworker, has noticed is, oh, hi, Alan. So Alan is the president of Veterans House Canada. So that was the supportive housing building I was speaking of. But what Frank has noticed is that there's a lot of people who have memory losses and they don't remember. So they don't remember their service number, Or there's a mental health issue where somebody believes that they are a veteran, and it takes, a while to be able to check the service number and see if that person is really a veteran. And what I've noticed, there's a commonality with, I work on the unsheltered file in Ottawa, and the thing that I've noticed is the acuity level of the veterans and the lack of healthcare involved.
I'm just going to add from my perspective, and I'm curious if others would say the same. For me, I just think so much that military culture, again, not well understood, and so important to, again, connect with the veteran partners and peers, because there's a whole world that the homelessness sector doesn't necessarily understand. And Jose and others, you've learned some of it over time, but still probably different than having lived it and really experienced it like others have. Yeah.
Even as you're getting ready to do Remembrance Day ceremonies, one of the key differences that I find as I travel throughout North America for Work Code is that in the U.S., when events happen and when people find out that you're a military family member, you are immediately thanked for your service. You're not just the veteran who's thanked for their service, the entire family is. And so just remembering that there's a family behind that veteran that also deserves respect, but also service.
I would like to speak with you after.
Sure.
I'm an ex-military spouse who I was left homeless after the breakdown of our marriage, and it was 2 months after our deployment. Was the
I have 10 years lived experience in homelessness. I'm not a veteran, and I guess to speak to the question that we were asked here, my experience with homelessness, it sounds like you really put an awful lot of effort into really getting to the core of what the resources are that your veterans need and how to get there and so on and so forth. I think from my experience and from what I now work as a peer supporter, I have for about 4 years, and what I'm noticing as the homelessness issue gets larger and larger, there's a lot of not in my backyard from metropolitan area to metropolitan area. So someone who is experiencing homelessness in York Region, let's say, in Ontario, would maybe be sent off to Hamilton, Ontario, where Hamilton was a little more amenable to having people who were homeless on their roster. Whereas York Region, it was kind of like a political thing where we don't really want a lot of homeless people here because it's a high tax base and we just don't want to see them around. I think that had I been afforded resources along the way, I went a long time without knowing the culture at all. I had no idea. And once someone introduced me into the culture and community was huge. Once someone introduced me into community and there were people who were looking and going like, hey, we have this option over here. You could be a peer supporter. That would be, and that started to kind of stop the hopelessness of, I have no friggin' idea how to get out of this situation because nobody's helping me. So I think, and I heard something about Medicine Hat too, that Medicine Hat was really, and it's not vet specific, that they really worked with the people who were homeless and really looked at what, man, I couldn't, for 10 years, I couldn't be in a room like this. Like I couldn't. There was just no way. I would just like drop on the ground. But nobody listened to that. It's kind of hard to find a home for someone who can't tolerate 4 walls and a ceiling without getting some sort of attention to that. So I think you're doing an awesome job, and I'd love to see that be able to transfer across to the homeless population as a whole, because we all have specific needs, and they're not just like princess needs. They're like real trauma-based needs. So anyways, thanks for all the work you do.
Thank you.
you for sharing. Thank you. Mark.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mark McDonald. I have 24 years service in the Army, and I'm also on the lived experience team at the Alliance for Homelessness in Ottawa. So I just want to mention a couple things. To pick up on that idea, I think we have a huge amount of support in the veteran community because it's so ingrained in us to support each other that we just have to get organized and find people. You know, I got this role, it has nothing to do with my veteranhood. It's a more generic lived experience role. But I think the culture is such, we've heard all about culture, right? The culture is such you could have supporters all over the place. Healthy, people who were finished their journey or never had a journey. And I think that would be very useful for everybody. And again, I think the way to structure it would be set it up through the Legion, because that's where all the people are. Thank you very much.
Is that specific to veterans, or are you talking about through the Legion, veteran, non-veteran?
I was talking more about veterans.
That's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
Because we just haven't tapped it yet. It's out there. I don't think we have.
I wonder if it would be a good thing to have something like the Legion for people who are homeless as well, like have that, anyways.
Yeah, these are great thoughts. We have about 3 minutes left, and I just want to leave it off to the panel. Any further reflections from the conversation, thoughts that you want to share before we wrap up?
Thanks for everybody in the room for their service. Thanks for sharing your stories. It's always so impactful when we do this work. So I know I always get emotional when I talk about this kind of stuff, whether it's vets or Indigenous folks or anybody, right? Like your experience. We'll continue to keep doing the good work, and pathways are so important, right? Like you see it for vets, and you can see some of those pathways, but others don't get that opportunity in many cases, or it's just not as easy. And so for me, that's a takeaway today is really like, how do we, name that secret sauce, and how do we work it for others? So thank you.
I think my final comments are really a thank you too, especially for the commentary around acknowledging families of our veterans who have served our country. And I want to thank you for your service as well to our country. I can tell you as a takeaway that I'm certainly going back to look at our screening questions around identifying veteran status and family members of veterans, so that hopefully will have an impact in our work, and I will be mindful to include that moving forward. So thank you very much.
I just want to echo what my colleagues have said. Thank you. I think we were brought here today to speak as subject matter experts, but we're in a room full of experts. So we're all leaving learning. I hope you know that what you say is really important, and we're taking that back to our communities. We have a responsibility to continue to make changes, and we will do that.
Again, thank you to everyone in the room. Something that came to me earlier today, and just listening to all the stories and the expertise in the room here, was something that was mentioned this morning actually is homelessness is a housing problem. And not that I necessarily disagree. Don't tell them that I disagreed with that. But something that we do in our community, and coming from an analytical brain, is why? Why is it a housing problem? And I think some of the stories that we've heard today is there's trauma, there's PTSD, and that trauma has then caused other reactions that's created housing problems. And yes, there's political, there's other things that are allocated and associated with that housing problem, but why? So something that I would challenge this room and continue to challenge yourselves every day is get to the root of the cause. Why is it? Why are we experiencing these things? So I will leave you with that.
And I don't have much to say after this, but I just want to say thank you so much for being a voice. And I will also make sure that, I can't wait for Tuesday to arrive, because I will make sure to include the families. I'm going to make sure that I also get the knowledge and find out the process so that we can absolutely help that. And I just want to say thank you a lot. It was we've learned a lot, that's for sure, and it's a never-ending thing, right? So these are why we have conferences and get together and then build on that and make it even better. So next year in Ottawa, well, we'll see what changes brought this last year.
Thank you again to all our panelists. Thank you to you for attending, and we are down for lunch and one final plenary before we wrap up the conference. Thank you.
Thank you.